End of historic punishment. Federal Reserve releases Wells Fargo after 7 years. What happens when the third-largest bank in the United States is finally released from the biggest growth restriction in modern history? And why this move could trigger a new era in the financial sector? In this video, you will understand the impact of this historic decision by the Federal Reserve, the behind-the-scenes of the crisis that shook Wells Fargo, and what investors like you need to know now. Stay until the end, because we reveal what comes next for the bank and for the market. In a historic milestone for the financial sector in the United States, the Federal Reserve announced this week the end of the growth restriction imposed on Wells Fargo, a sanction that lasted for 7 long years and dates back to one of the biggest reputational crises in the American banking system. It all started in 2016, when internal business practices that shook the bank's image came to light. The repercussions were immediate and profound. A trader, in an interview with Barron's, summed up the market sentiment at the time. Who would want to own shares of this? It smells bad. Wells Fargo, then considered one of the most stable and well-managed banks in the country, found itself embroiled in an institutional crisis. The response from regulators was harsh and unprecedented. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau fined the bank $100 million, the largest penalty ever imposed at the time. Another $85 million was paid in additional sanctions to the local government and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. But the most severe measure came from the Fed itself, an asset cap that prevented the bank from growing until it had profoundly corrected its management and control structures. This sanction is considered the most stringent of the monetary authority, used only in serious cases of prolonged non-compliance with regulatory standards. The decision was announced the day before Janet Yellen stepped down as Fed chair and Jerome Powell took office. It was a symbolic gesture that demonstrated the seriousness of the case. In the following years, Wells Fargo began a real restructuring. It changed its leadership, separated the positions of president and CEO, reviewed business lines, and strengthened the supervision of its board of directors. Now, with the suspension of the asset limit, the bank is entering a new phase. It will still need to undergo an independent evaluation that will measure the sustainability and effectiveness of the changes implemented. For analysts, the release paves the way for significant gains. John Pancari, from Evercore ISI, estimates that the bank could add around $1.19 per share to its annual profit, an 18% jump. According to him, the main factors will be the growth of deposits, higher revenue from market operations, cost reduction, and expansion of the credit portfolio. On the other hand, Vivek Juneja, from J.P. Morgan, points out that the gains need to be balanced with new investments, since the institution is still under observation in areas such as international compliance and prevention of financial crimes. Wells' trajectory since 2016 has spanned 3 U.S. presidents, 3 CEOs, and a global pandemic. From a workforce of 269,000, the bank now operates with 20% fewer professionals. And it was only in 2019 that Charlie Scharf, coming from large institutions such as BNY and Visa, took over as permanent CEO, with the clear mission of rebuilding the bank's reputation. Scharf recently stated that it was not possible to promise a date for the end of the asset limit, as the decision would be up to the regulators. But he highlighted that the bank is today a completely different entity than it was 5 years ago. However, the challenges remain. Last September, the bank signed a new agreement with the regulatory body to strengthen its compliance practices, especially in relation to international integrity and transaction security. The institution assured that it is treating the matter with the same urgency applied to other regulatory commitments. For attentive investors, this change represents an opportunity. Since Barron's recommended buying Wells Fargo shares in October, the stock has risen 34%, outperforming the S&P 500 index by 30 percentage points. Now, with the end of the asset limit, the door is open to new institutional investors, in addition to the concrete possibility of expanding operations and consistent profit growth. If you've stuck around this far, congratulations! You now understand why the end of this restriction is more than a victory for Wells Fargo. It's a sign that the American banking system is entering a new cycle of transparency, oversight, and reinvention. And if you want to follow the next developments in the financial sector, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. In the next videos, we will bring analyses of the behind the scenes of the Federal Reserve, changes in the global market, and how to prepare for the upcoming movements.